name is Stephanie Lee, and I'm a psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We're hoping that by now you know we're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. We're here for you wherever you are with expert telehealth resources, including diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, group programs for anxiety, mood disorders, ADHD, and more, remote neuropsychological evaluations. So please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. With protests over the violent deaths of Black Americans dominating the news, it's understandable that many kids are feeling scared, confused, or angry about the situation. We're all thinking about racism and violence and how to raise caring children, how to talk to them about what's happening in our society. We're happy to try and answer all of your questions about whatever parenting challenges you have and the anxieties that you might be facing yourself. So today I'm here to talk very specifically about managing disappointment in young kids. As I said, though, I'm happy to answer any questions that are relevant to you in the moment. But I want to make sure that I remind you to post your questions in the feed. We'll also post some links to helpful resources on childmind.org as we go. And remember, we're here every day and we look forward to answering your questions. We try to put as much relevant content in our resources as we possibly can. So the more you let us know what you're looking for, the easier it is for us to be targeted. So thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to start with just some questions that have come up previously about helping kids manage disappointment, things that we've been reading and questions that families have been bringing up in therapy and in treatment, right? So the first one we have here is about my son's camp is canceled and he's crushed. I want to help him find a way to make the best of his summer anyway, but nothing I say seems to work. What do I do? So I want to first go ahead and validate the fact that this is really disappointing stuff. And while adults may be able to kind of keep one summer in perspective, that might be more challenging for a young child whose history and development is a lot less long, a lot less long in duration. And so they might have a little bit less to go on that way, right? So I think when we're managing disappointment, as I've talked about before on these broadcasts, we want to use the 2 E's, which I'm stealing from Philip Kendall's Coping Cat, which is a manualized treatment for kids with anxiety. But we want to use the 2 E's. We want to be empathic and we want to be encouraging. So we want to make sure that we're jumping in with our kids to let them know that we hear them. We're validating how hard it is to have this level of disappointment. And then you want to move to the second E, which is encouragement, to let them know that you're going to try your hardest to still make it as successful as a summer as you possibly can. I think it's important for you to kind of control the messaging around this as much as possible. So if it is at all possible to talk with your partner or anyone else involved in care ahead of time to find out what alternative plans may be so that you can try to make those plans sound as exciting as they possibly can. I'm not sure. I know we at the Child Mind Institute have moved our summer treatment program to a virtual option. And so I would certainly suggest that if your camp has a virtual option, that possibly looking into those things, looking into Child Mind's virtual options for socialization in the summer. Also thinking about just a little bit more about what was his favorite parts of camp and whether or not some of those things might be able to be relived in a modified way this summer. So if it's about getting with friends that he's had this connection with every summer, is there a way for us to maybe have a virtual outing with those friends, right? If it's about the ropes course that they do, is a ropes course in your house or in your neighborhood or in your backyard feasible in some way? I know our summer program typically ended the treatment program with a circus or a fair or a fun day that we would often get the kids excited about the entire month of July. So is there maybe a project or a fun activity that your family can look forward to and maybe build on across the summer? Some camps I know also have activities that do progress across the summer. So gardening activities, or looking into making a video that can be, built on a little bit each day. So thinking again creatively about ways that you might find some alternative fun things to do with your kid, and then trying to sell them as much as you can, right? But using those 2 E's, again, being empathic. I hear you. This is hard for all of us. I'm disappointed. And encouraging. I know we're going to work through this together and still have the best summer we possibly can. Right. Looks like we have a question from Helen. Thanks so much for joining us, Helen, and a shout out to you. How do I get my child to try? She's just reluctant to trying things, right? So great question. And I know that this is something that comes up for a lot of parents, pre-COVID times, and then probably even more as kids might feel a little bit more anxiety or a little bit more resistance or opposition. I would say first and foremost, using some external reinforcement or reward for your child when they do put any small amount of effort in is a really great way of establishing some behavioral momentum. So what I would say is having a conversation with your child at a neutral time, not at a high stakes time, to talk about how you will be targeting effort and trying when things are hard. If your child is old enough to understand frustration tolerance, and that is a theme or a topic, I would suggest it. And then I might actually make a brag book, right? Or start developing times that we put together to say, this is a time I saw you trying really hard. I love it. Great work. Let's keep it up. Let's put it in your frustration tolerance brag book or your effort brag book. Another thing that kids really enjoy is getting positive attention and praise for their efforts, and having that across a lot of different adults or individuals, possibly even peers if it's relevant and appropriate. So I've worked with a lot of families around parents trying to snap a picture of their kid working hard or doing something that they don't normally do, and then creating a text chain with extended family members or other people, maybe a teacher or a staff member that you feel comfortable sharing that information with, and that your child gets an extra dose of praise or reward or attention for doing the hard thing. Also keeping in mind that frustration tolerance is the type of thing that does build across time. So if your child has a low set of skills in that area right now, it is the kind of thing that can be built across time. So really great question, and hopefully that's helpful in helping you think just a little bit more about building the momentum, right? We have a question here from Kirsty coming in asking, how would I encourage an extremely reluctant 11-year-old boy to return to school? It's a really powerful question, and one I think that a lot of parents are struggling with themselves, just in terms of their own safety and their own comfort level, and kind of returning to the new normal, what that will look like, right? Challenging. I would say first and foremost, make sure that you and the important adults, the important stakeholders in this child's life, are all on the same page about the messaging. The very reason I say to start with that is because what we don't want to happen is for your 11-year-old son to receive some feedback or input from you that's in contrast to feedback from another adult, say grandma or dad or mom or someone else, right? They might get a message that's different than the one you're trying to provide. So first and foremost, I'd get all the adults on the same page if at all possible. Then secondly, I would start again to think just a little bit about ways that this could be presented in a gradual way. If your 11-year-old is reluctant to go back to school because of true anxiety about just kind of being out in the community, there may be small steps, small kind of mini exposures, if you will, that can be provided to your child as a way of building back up to school. If your child is resistant to go back to school because of the demands that are likely to be based on the 11-year-old in school again, the way to gradually increase the process for that might be a little different in terms of increasing academic demands as the end of the summer starts to progress, or making things that are not just, the summer tends to be a very child-directed time, and school tends to be a very adult-directed time. And so when kids have to go from completely child-directed to adult-directed, that contrast can be stark and challenging. So thinking about ways to gradually increase the adult-directed demands your child is facing in the day may also be a way of kind of gradually increasing their comfort level with returning, right? So again, it really It really loves the, really depends on the reason why you think your child is putting up that opposition. But I would also say, as silly as it sounds, reinforcement is going to be a huge factor, and really making sure that you're praising and providing rewards that are genuine to your 11-year-old, right? So if this is effortful and hard, and we think it's unlikely that your 11-year-old is likely to come in immediate contact with internal reinforcement for returning to school, if he does come in contact with anxiety, or there is more work, then just saying good job might not be enough to get him over the hump when he does go back. I would certainly have things on the ready, a big carrot to use to increase that motivation and to provide that follow through. So great question. And hopefully that's helpful. I know that you have your path kind of set in front of you there, and we're here along the way if kids continue to put up more resistance as well. So it looks like we have another question here from Genevieve asking, thanks so much for joining us, Genevieve, saying, my daughter is dwelling so much on the negative. I've been trying to remind her of positive things as well as acknowledging the difficulty, but she's so focused on everything that's wrong. So I'm so sorry, Genevieve, to say if you're feeling like a little bit, you got a negative Nancy there at home, or someone who is having some difficulty focusing on the positive things. And I think that we could all relate and empathize in relation to that right now, that it's hard to feel hopeful when a lot of things do feel hopeless, or different or uncertain. That being said, I think it's important for you first and foremost to model as much positivity as you can, focusing yourself on positive things, making sure that you make a big deal out of it, provide her some of that labeled praise and positive attention when she does say something positive, or even just something neutral. Kind of the absence of negativity would be something that I would be praising and making a big deal out of. I love how just engaging her around more neutral topics if you can't get her to swing all the way to positive just yet. I think it's also a good idea to maybe think about a structured or consistent way that you could be checking in about positive things, maybe at dinner each night, or in the morning when you wake her up, and just kind of saying, I want to go over the roses and the thorns of your day. The roses is the best part and the thorn is the worst part, and giving them equal attention in your responses. Oftentimes, parents may inadvertently get tricked into talking about negative things for a long time with their child because they're trying to rationalize or help them to see the positive in it. I think if you feel that it's unlikely that your daughter's going to shift her mind or change her mind about the topic, instead of wasting time trying to convince her, I would try to do something else positive and see if she'll join you in it, right? So if a child were having a really hard time and just seemed to be down in the dumps a lot, I might consistently go in their room around the same time each day and play some Legos. If they join me, awesome. That's great. If they don't, I'm just playing Legos for 5 to 10 minutes in their room each day, letting them know I'm available for those things, right? But making sure that we don't inadvertently give more attention to the negative responses than we do the positive. Hopefully that makes sense, Genevieve. It is a little complicated, and I know it can be hard to get kids to focus, get adults to focus on the positive. But again, making a big deal out of any time that you see her doing that. Possibly another way might be similar to the brag book, right? Which it sounds like Helen really likes, so I'm glad to hear that, right? Brag books have gone a long way for me in my career here, but another thing, Genevieve, you might want to do is even like penny for your positive thoughts, right? So you think about having a jar wherever every time your daughter does kind of share a positive thought or is able to kind of look on the positive sides of things, you put a penny in a jar, and maybe when the pennies get to a certain line, you guys do something fun, or you get to engage in a fun activity. So thinking about different ways, again, to highlight those things. Thanks, everyone, for your participation. It looks like another question kind of hot off the presses here. Katie's asking, how do I help my son engage in play that is not on screens, but also not dependent on my involvement either? Really, really great question. I know, Katie, that it's very difficult to engage kids in this day and age in alternative activities. And so that's a really great question, something I've been talking about with a lot of different parents these days and caregivers. I think the very first thing that I would maybe recommend that I don't think parents think about very often is the rotation of toys. So your child, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that your child has a lot of different sets of toys. And one thing that I often suggest to parents, as I said, is rotating those toys. So thinking about, can I take a couple toy sets, put them in the closet, put them in the basement, take them out of sight, take them out of mind, and then can I bring those back in a couple weeks from now in a more exciting and novel way? So if we are not really into Legos right this second, can we put them away for a little bit and then bring them back out in a couple weeks as an exciting opportunity to build a castle, right? So I would say, again, kind of thinking about what kinds of what resources you have available to you and how you might rotate those things to spice it up a little bit, right? Everybody loves novelty. Everybody loves diversity in terms of activity. So I would go there first. Another thing I would suggest is possibly playing an activity with your child for a small period of time and then decreasing the amount of attention or engagement you provide during that activity so that your child learns to engage with those activities in a more independent and gradual way. So for instance, maybe I guess I'm on a Lego kick today. I'll switch to Magna-Tiles, which is also something I love to play and build with. But I might say something like, if your child isn't good at playing with Magna-Tiles on their own, maybe joining them to start the building with Magna-Tiles and then letting them know, I need to take a really quick bathroom break. I'll be right back. I want you to keep building. You run to the bathroom for 30 seconds. You don't actually go to the bathroom, right? Because this isn't about going to the bathroom. It's about increasing your child's independent play skills. But you come back reliably in 30 seconds so your child doesn't lose interest, so that they don't think you're not going to come back when you say you're going to. And so you come back after those 30 seconds and you give big praise for what the child has accomplished on their own. Then maybe slowly but surely you increase your 30-second break to a minute, to maybe 2 minutes, up until the point where maybe your child is able to play for 5 minutes independently with those activities and tasks. And again, making a big deal out of their ability to do those things. I also think about making sure that we're telling kids a little bit more about what to do instead of what not to do. So instead of saying get off the screen, actually having maybe an activity menu available to them. So instead of playing screens today, you have these 3 options. You can play Magna-Tile, you can do a Go Noodle break, or you can play a board game with your sister, right? So kind of putting some different options out there. And like I said, maybe creating a menu of options so that you're thinking about things and they're thinking about things, and having those options available to you visually can go a long way. Okay, we're blowing up here. So Andrea's asking, my son stays up late on his phone and sleeps late too. Would rewards rather than a schedule work here? Andrea, that's a great question. I'm going to say that I love the way you're thinking. So big label praise to you for thinking creatively about not just the structure, but the reinforcement as well. I think that this is something that might actually need to go hand in hand, Andrea, right? So staying up late on the phone is definitely the thing we think is leading to sleeping too late in the morning. I think that you want to decide whether or not you're targeting getting him off that phone in the night or getting him up early, knowing that if you target one, it's likely to correlate with the other behavior there, right? I think that putting a reward in place for your son handing over his phone at a specific time each night would probably be a great way to start. I think also thinking a little bit more about, are there limitations that can be set if your child is unwilling to follow that command? So for instance, saying to your son, I'm turning off the internet at 11 p.m. at night, whatever time it feels appropriate. I'm not suggesting 11 o'clock. Kind of whatever feels appropriate to the culture of your family, saying that's the time at which your phone is going to go off. I want to let you know that if you bring your phone to me independently at 10:59 or any time before that, here's the reward, right? Here's $1, right? Or here's a quarter, and when, and for those things, letting them know it's not a decision whether or not you're going to get off your phone at that time. The decision is how you respond to the limit being set. I think that that's likely to go a long way. You could also provide some type of reward for getting up at a specific time. But I would make sure that if you say your child needs to get up at a certain time, that you're able to try to follow through with that. Come in that morning at that time and wake them up and kind of force them into their activity. I think a schedule does work in terms of helping kids to have some structure and things. So I think having a morning schedule and making sure that maybe some phone time follows the first demanding activity, which might actually be just getting out of bed and doing some hygiene tasks, that could be helpful as well. So hopefully, Andrea, that gives you some ideas and some thoughts. Also keeping in mind that whatever reward you end up putting in place should be meaningful and genuine to your son. So for instance, I like chocolate, but if Child Mind Institute decided they were going to start paying me in chocolate this week, I probably wouldn't show up to work. I only work for money. And so we want to make sure that you're using a potent reinforcer with your son so that you're not missing the mark and putting a reward in there that isn't actually super meaningful or going to motivate his behavior in the way we need it to. Great question. Thanks for your participation. It looks like we have another question coming in about coping advice. And this one comes from Nadine asking, my 9-year-old son lashes out physically and verbally if things don't go 100% his way. Every day is a bad day lately. Any advice on coping? Nadine, it looks like you're a special education teacher and you're telling me something that parents tell me a lot, which is you might know these skills or kind of have the knowledge and it's hard to implement with your own family and your own kid and in your own situation. And I can validate that, right? I think that we even know that from an evolutionary perspective that kids, your own, kid plays on your heartstring and is able to impact your behavior in a different way than a kid that's not evolutionarily linked to you, right? So definitely we know that can be the case. And it's hard to implement in a consistent way the things that we're asking if you're doing them in an intense way all day as well. So I can definitely also relate to that one. Nadine, you're in a tough spot, but I can give you some advice and you can kind of go from there. I think the very first thing I would suggest is physical aggression in my mind is different than verbal aggression. I never ignore something that's dangerous or unsafe or destructive. So if a child, regardless of their age, is engaging in something that's dangerous or aggressive, I would immediately intervene. I'm very careful about the way I intervene. I'm not going to put a bullseye of extra attention on it. So I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to actually kind of do a lot of hand wagging. I'm not going to give, again, a lot of extra attention. When I think about attention to kid behavior, I think about it in terms of proximity. How close was I when I told the kid this? Duration, how long did it take me to tell them these things? Tone and enthusiasm, how big was the input, kind of in the way that I was sharing this feedback for a kid, right? And so those are the kinds of things. If a child is engaging in something dangerous or unsafe, you immediately want to intervene in a very matter-of-fact, almost robotic way. That's unsafe. This is the consequence, right? That's unsafe. You cannot hit. You need to, you will lose your iPad later tonight. In terms of verbal aggression, and this is something that often we work on in phases, right? Because verbal aggression is also not appropriate or adaptive, but it's not dangerous or unsafe. And often the function of verbal aggression is attention. A kid actually wants you to engage with them, get back and forth with them, do it a little bit more, right? And so if that's the case, I often suggest to parents that they implement what we call planned ignoring, or literally not talking back, not looking back, not giving any additional attention to those types of behaviors, knowing that the most powerful intervention when a kid wants attention is the silent treatment. I need to warn you that if you implement planned ignoring, you are likely to see an extinction burst. And what I mean by extinction burst is every behavior gets worse before it gets better. And your child, just like a lot of other kids, is incredibly bright. If a tool used to work for them and it's their favorite tool, they're going to keep using it. If this is my favorite pen and all of a sudden it doesn't work, I'm not going to throw it away immediately. I'm going to try a little harder. I'm going to really, really scribble and see if I can make this work. So if your child is used to saying, I hate you, and getting a big response, the first time they say, I hate you, and you don't give a big response, they might verbally scroll to something else. My friends hate you. I hope you die. They might amp it up, right? They might stomp their feet. They might try to hit at that point, at which point you would implement the consequence for hitting, right? It's not an easy thing to do. It's actually one of the hardest things I ask parents to do is use planned ignoring, but it is actually usually one of the most powerful things. I would also suggest, Nadine, that if you're not able to hold out. If you're not able to implement planned ignoring, if you know your 9-year-old son is in a position to win, if you will, give in right away, right? Don't hold out. Don't make it so your child engages in more disruptive or inappropriate behavior in order to get your attention or to get things to shift. Give in right away, right? The other thing I can tell you, Nadine, and I know we're getting ready to kind of close out here, but another thing I would suggest to you is in terms of talking with your 9-year-old about adaptive coping skills, but again, at a more neutral time. So talking with your 9-year-old about, here's your feeling. I can tell that you're angry, right? Here are some things you can do when you're angry, maybe even having a coping toolbox or a list of coping activities that you can direct him to in the moment of frustration, knowing that it's unlikely that he will do those things independently, or if he's really dysregulated, that it would be a good time to prompt, right? But making sure also there's rewards linked to his use of the coping skills. So if you see him using one of those coping skills, you make a big deal out of it, you go out of your way to praise it, or maybe your child gets rewarded specifically for using that. Oh, I love the way you went over and took some deep breaths. I know it didn't work the first time, but I love that you tried. Thanks for doing that. All right. So again, thinking about some of those coping skills, the last thing I might say, and an activity I often engage in with kids, again, around neutral times, is problem solving baseball or problem solving kickball, where I pitch a kid a problem and then we go through the problem solving steps in base form. So first base is, what's my problem? Second base is, what are my choices? Third base is, what are, if I pick those choices, what might happen, kind of future telling a little bit, and then bring it on home. Was I safe or out? Did I pick the right one? This is not a game to play to just relive bad decision making. This is a game to play with your child when they make a good decision, make a big deal out of it, and then slowly but surely you can also increase maybe the frequency with which you're presenting problems that you think are a little bit more real life. So really great question, Nadine. Appreciate just Andrea and Katie, everyone's participation in today's Facebook Live. It's really helpful. And the more that we know what your questions are, the easier it is for us to target and make sure that we're giving you the right answers here. So really great question. I think just kind of in terms of time, we're kind of wrapping up here. And so if there's not any additional questions, I'm just going to say again that I thank you all for joining me, and I do hope this was helpful. Remember, Child Mind is here every day to support you, and we know that these are extraordinary times. So we're here to help you and support you and validate you. The Child Mind Institute can help with mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. So please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the incredible variety of remote telehealth resources we have available during this time for children, teens, and young adults. We hope that you'll be safe, and thanks again.